This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring, and this video is going to go through the calculator section of the October 2021 PSAT. Basically, all 31 problems that were featured on that test. As I say at the start of most of these videos, just please be aware that these problems are not going to be completed within the actual time limit for the test, because I like to go through as many possible solutions as there are, and some problems have 2 or 3 different ways that you can solve them when you look at various techniques or using the graphing calculator. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started on the calculator section of the October 2021 PSAT.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Okay, just before I get started on the calculator section of the October 2021 PSAT exam, please, if you like these videos and find them helpful, click the thumbs up for them, and also feel free to subscribe to my channel and sign up for notifications as well. So let's go ahead, now we'll get started. Question number 1. All right, so with this first question, question number 1, here basically what you're asked to is take this text that they give you and translate it into an equation. And specifically, it's going to be a linear equation, with 2 variables, x and y. And the answer is going to be A. And the reason for that is because if you look at what you're given here, what you're told, you have basically high brass and you have low brass. And high brass is x and low brass is y. And the total amount of material that you're given is this 2,000 kilograms of copper. Okay, so notice all these are equal to 2,000. So that part's the same. And then in the sentence up here where it says, high brass, which again we're representing by x, is 65% copper by mass. So since the equation is equal to 2,000, which is the number of kilograms of copper, we have to take this 65% and multiply that by something in order to get how much copper there is in that. So it's just going to be 0.65 times x, because x is the number of kilograms of high brass that we have. So we have x kilograms of this high brass, and 65% of it is copper, so that means 65% of x is the total number of kilograms that are copper. And the rest are some other, I guess it would be zinc, according to the problem. And then you do the same thing with the low brass. It's basically 80%, or 0.8 times y, the total mass of the low brass, and then you just add those two things together and they equal 2,000. So correct answer here is letter A. Question number 2, this is actually a very easy, very simple, straightforward question. The median is, of course, the middle value. Since there are 5 values here, the median will be the third value. The way, just to review, that you can find the median of a data set when let's say there are a large number of values and you can't just count it up like we're going to do in this problem, is you take the total number of items, you divide it by 2, and now in this problem it comes out to, so 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, and therefore we round that up to 3. So the third item in this set, when these numbers are in either ascending or descending order, will be the median. In this problem, that's just going to be 12. Now, you could also use the method where you cross out, starting at the left and right. And so, for example, just get rid of that, keep the answer circled. I do one from the left, one from the right, one from the left, one from the right, and I just have my median left in the middle. Also, just to review, if you have an even number of items, then the median will be the average of the 2 middle items. So in other words, if you go to do the crossout method, instead of being left with 1 item in the middle, you'll be left with 2 items, and you just have to average those together, and that will be your median. Moving on now to question number 3. This is just basically a unit conversion problem. So you could use the dimensional analysis approach that you use in chemistry. If you have never heard that term before, not familiar with it, that's fine. You can then just set up a proportion like I'm going to do. So I would put 2340, and that's miles, on the top of one fraction. And the number of kilometers that it's equal to, I'm going to put x on the bottom. And then I'm going to set that equal to the conversion factor that you're given here, which is 1 mile. And I will put that on top because miles have to be in the same corresponding position. So top left, top right. And then the kilometers would go in the bottom, since again, we want them in the same position. So bottom left, bottom right. Now we could just cross multiply. And so if we do that, we're just going to get x times 1, which is just x. And then going the other direction, you do 1.61 times 2340. That you can just do on a calculator. It comes out to 3,767.4 kilometers, and therefore it just gets rounded off to 3767. So letter C is the correct answer. Question number 4. Here we have a function, and basically they want to know for what value of x does this function equal to 7. So in other words, all we're doing here is we are replacing the f of x with 7 and then solving that linear equation. In other words, we're finding the input or the x value that gives an output value of 7. So we would just add 5 to both sides and then go ahead, divide by 6 on both sides, and you should get x equals 2. So the correct answer for this one is letter A, 2. Also note, it might be easier on this one just to take the answer choices and plug them in and then figure out which one gives you 7 as the output. Okay, basically, in other words, you could use the technique of back solving, especially since you have a calculator. Just punch in 6 times 2 minus 5, enter. Is it 7? Well, it is, so therefore you wouldn't have to check the other three, answer choices. All right, now question 5. Here we have just a multiplication question. So all you're going to do is basically just have to it's basically really just extended distributive property. So the way that I like to do this is I take the first term, saying the first one, and then I multiply that by all the terms in the second parenthesis. So for the first parenthesis, that's going to be 8x to the ninth, because negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8, and we add the exponents when we multiply. 5 plus 4 is 9. Then for the next one, I'm going to get negative 12x to the sixth. Now, it turns out in this problem that there are no like terms, so I'm actually just going to write them all out basically, horizontally. So now I would start with the second term in the first parenthesis, and basically that's going to multiply by both the terms in the second. So 2x cubed times negative 2x to the fourth, that's going to be negative 4x to the seventh. Now, one thing I want to point out is on tests like the SAT, PSAT, ACT, and so on, where you have the multiple choice answers given to you, you do not need to spend the time doing all the work on some problems. Because if you look at what I have so far, okay, I have 3 terms. I have 8x to the ninth. So notice, in answer choice A, do I see that term anywhere? No. Cross it out. Do I see that in answer choice B? No. Cross it out. Now I'm down to C and D. Notice in D, it has 8x to the ninth, but it's negative. So technically on this problem, you really only had to multiply the first 2 terms to get the 8x to the ninth to know that that has to be the correct answer. Now, I'm going to do all the work out just to show you, just to confirm that that C is the correct answer. But keep in mind, on this test, you do not need to finish the problem like you would on a regular, say, math test in school, where you are have a free response question, that you have to list out, give the answer yourself. Okay, so continuing, we now have the 2x cubed times 3x. That is going to be positive 6x to the fourth. And then the last term, we can go underneath here, times the next 2 terms. We have positive 12x to the fifth. And then it's going to be minus 18x squared. So now if you look what I have written over here, it should look identical to the answer choice, except for a couple things. The terms are a little bit out of order, and that's fine. That part doesn't matter because we could just switch them and rewrite them if we wanted to. But all the terms match up. 8x to the ninth, check. Negative 4x to the seventh, check. Minus 12x to the sixth, check. Let's see, positive 12x to the fifth, check. Plus 6x to the fourth, check. Minus 18x squared, check. So we have the correct answer. All right, moving on to question number 6. This problem is, again, just a kind of like a unit conversion type problem, but you can solve it just using proportions. So if there's two different ways you could do it. I mean, really, the way that you solve this is you just take the density, which is the 11,909, and you just multiply that by the 1.75 square miles, because there's 11,909 people in 1 square mile, but this neighborhood has 1.75 square miles. So you just multiply the two together, and you get your answer. Okay, comes out to 20,840.75, and that just rounds off to letter C, 20,840. However, if you didn't recognize that, you can set up a proportion and solve a proportion. So on the one side, I would put 11,909, okay, and that is the number of people, and that's the number of people in 1 square mile. Now, on the right side, how many people are we going to have? Well, that's x, because that's what we're trying to figure out. So again, I match people on the top across left and right. And on the bottom now, I put the 1.75 square miles. And then you could just cross multiply these, and what happens is you do exactly what I did initially. You multiply 11,909 times 1.75, and that's just equal to x, which is the 20,840.75. So correct answer again is letter C. All right, now moving on to question number 7. So here you have a kind of a geometry related question. We have a square. Actually, I guess technically we have two squares. And we know that the side length of the first square is 3 times the side length of the second one, and wants to know the perimeter is how many times the perimeter. Okay, so like, for example, let's say this is 3x, 3x, 3x. This is square ABCD here. And then for EFGH, so these would just be like x. So notice the perimeter for the first one. If we just add up all the sides, we get 12x. Or you could just take one side and multiply it by 4. That's the shortcut formula for a square. Perimeter is 4 times s. Same thing for the smaller one. It's just going to be 4x, or x plus x plus x plus x. So how many times is the perimeter of larger square compared to the smaller one? Well, you can clearly see it is 3 times as large. So the correct answer is letter A. All right, two other things just about this problem. Another way you could do this is you could actually do picking numbers. Instead of using these generic expressions, you could actually just choose values. So you could say, oh, the smaller square is 1, 1, 1, 1. The larger square is 3, 3, 3, 3. Perimeter of the larger one is 12. Perimeter of the smaller one is 4. It's 3 times as much. That looks very similar to what I just did, but for a lot of people, it's much easier just to work with numbers, concrete values, rather than variables, and that's totally fine. So again, that's the strategy of picking numbers. Another thing to remember too is, so perimeter is like one-dimensional. Therefore, like if the sides or the scale factor between the sides of two different polygons is, some number, like in this case it's 3 times, they tell us, something that is one-dimensional, like perimeter, will have the same scale factor or the same relationship. In other words, it's going to be 3 times as well. However, if you look at the area or you look at the volume, let's say if you had a 3-dimensional figure like a cube, then that's where the the scale factor between, let's say, the areas, it's not going to be 3 times as large. It's actually 9 times as large because you have to take the original scale factor of 3 for each side, and you have to square it because area is two-dimensional. And for volume, you would have to cube it, so it technically would be 27 times as large. All right, next question, number 8. Here we have two histograms. Um, they ask us questions about the standard deviation for dataset A versus dataset B. So now I'm going to zoom in here just so they're a little bit larger on the screen. Okay, so which of the following compares the standard deviations for A versus B? A is greater, B is greater, they're equal, or can't tell. So when we look at these data sets, standard deviation is the amount by which the values are spread out relative to the mean or to the average of them. So a high standard deviation means the numbers are very spread out from the mean or the average. A low standard deviation means they are not spread out, meaning they're very close to the mean or the average. So in this instance, we can see that in dataset A, the values are much more like spread out compared to dataset B. So the standard deviation for A is going to be much, much greater than it is for B. Because notice in B, they're all between, say, 0 and 24. But in A, they go from 0, all the way up to something between 39 and 42. So therefore, the correct answer for this one is going to be letter A. The standard deviation for A is greater than that for B. Continuing now, question 9. Here we have a question that deals basically with transformation of graphs. So they give you this function f. It's graphed out here, and then it's shifted down 6 units, and they want to know what function defines g. Okay, so there are multiple ways you could do this. I think the easiest way to do this is to notice that f crosses the y-axis at 0, 2. So if you shifted down 6 units, it would now cross the y-axis at 0, -4. In other words, its y-intercept would be 0, -4. So when I look at these 4 possible answer choices, which one has a y-intercept of -4? Well, it's clearly this one. It's in y equals mx plus b form, and my b value here is -4. Now, an alternate way to do this, and it's just a little bit more work, would be to find the actual equation for f and then subtract 6 from it. So again, we already know that the intercept is 2, so we already know b is equal to 2. And then for the slope, you could just count. You notice you go up to right 1. So the slope for f, the function f of x is going to be 2 over 1, or just 2. So f of x would just be 2x plus 2. And now if it's shifted down 6 units, you're just going to subtract 6 from it at the end. Therefore, well, it's not f of x. This would actually be g of x. It's going to be 2x and then -4, combining the plus 2 minus 6. So that's an alternate way to do it, but it's really not any different than the first method. All right, question number 10. Here we have a trinomial expression, and they're asking about factoring it. And so if we do that, this one I would probably just say use trial and error, because we know it's going to be x and x. And because the c term, the -36 here at the end, the number term, is negative, the signs are going to be opposite. So they're going to be plus and minus. And we're looking for some factors of 36, specifically -36, that add up to +9. So if we do that, it should be +12 and -3. So this expression is going to factor like this. And now it says it's factored to the form x plus a times x plus b, where a and b are integers. Which of the following could be the value of a? Okay, so because it's x plus a and x plus b, that means that the only possibility for a is the 12 right here. Technically, if we're going to take this parenthesis and write it as x plus something, it would be x plus -3, and therefore, like, it would, the B or whatever you want to call it would be -3, not +3. So that's why the answer to this question is letter D, 12. Next up, we have another histogram, statistics related question. So here they want to know how many measurements are at least 5.4 but less than 5.8. So all we're looking for is basically how many are in this bar right here and this bar right here. Those are the values between 5.4 and 5.8. So we get the frequencies from the y-axis. So the first bar is 9, second bar goes up to 7. Add those two together, so we have 16. Correct answer is just going to be letter D, 16, and there's no more work that is needed, for this problem. Okay, question number 12. We have an absolute value equation. So the way you would solve this initially is first isolate the absolute value expression. And then after you've done that, so divide by 4 on both sides, then you can set up two equations and you can solve each of them. So the first one looks like the original problem, just without the absolute value signs. And then the second one is going to look like the original problem on the left side, but we will make the right side negative. So it will be equal to -4. And you can solve them both the same way. Add 5, add 5. So we would get 3x equals 9 and 3x equals 1. And then divide by 3. Okay, so we get two answers. We get +3 and +1/3. So it looks like the correct answer is going to be letter D. Now, an alternate way you could solve this is you could take the answer choices and plug them into the calculator and see which ones worked and which ones didn't work. The only problem with doing that, again, that's back solving, on this specific problem is that, like, if you test it out 1/3 and you find that it works, which it does, then, I mean, you could eliminate this answer choice and this one, but you still would have to test out 3 in order to see if that worked as well. Okay, like a lot of problems, if you test out an answer choice and it works, then you know that that's the correct answer. But it's not true on this one because some of the values in the answer choices overlap between them. All right, next we have question number 13. Here is a question involving the hertz or the frequency of a note on a piano. And so here's the thing. This one is basically going to be another type of proportion question. So it's like basically what's happening is, excuse me, you have some note which has a frequency of 370 hertz, okay? And they tell you that the ratio of the frequency for any note to its next highest note is 1 to 1.6. So for this given note, I would put down here a 1. I'm just going to set this up as a proportion. Then for the next higher note, its frequency we don't know. That's what we're solving for. So we'd put in x. And then down here, I would put in the 1.6, basically the scale factor. 1.06, not 1.6. So all you're going to end up doing when you cross multiply here is you're just going to end up multiplying this 370 times 1.06. And then when you do that, it's going to come out to 392.2. Again, that you just do on the calculator. And that just gets obviously rounded off to 392. So the correct answer for this one is going to be letter A, 392 hertz. That's the frequency of the next highest note after 370 hertz. All right, on this question, number 14, there are two ways you could do it. So, kind of like the shortcut way that they want you to do this, this is basically involves a technique kind of called like expression matching. They want you to recognize that if you take this given equation and you divide both sides by 3, what happens on the left side is you get 15x over 3, which is 5x, and positive 6 over 3 is positive 2. So then the left side turns into 5x plus 2, and they want to know what that's equal to. And so you divide the right side by 3, it just becomes negative 2/3. Correct answer, letter C, that's it. However, not everyone would recognize that. Not everyone would understand that. So if you didn't, that's fine. You can just go ahead and solve the problem out as normal. Okay? Meaning solve for x, and then we're just going to multiply it by 5 and add 2. So first step, we're going to subtract 6. And it's really not going to be that, that difficult or time consuming to solve this. You get negative 8/15 for x. Now, it's a little annoying because it's a fraction, but we'll just go to the calculator and we will punch it in on there. So we have 5 times, and we've got negative 8 divided by 15. I'm just going to write it horizontally rather than vertically, and then plus 2. Okay, it gave me the answer as a decimal, so I would just go to the math menu and choose option 1 to convert it to a fraction. All right, negative 2/3, that confirms correct answer is letter C. Okay, question number 15. Here you have an exponential equation. Exponential graph an exponential function, and they want you to identify the equation that you're given down here. So a couple things. This graph is in the shape of just the basic exponential growth function. So that means you can technically eliminate b and d right away because those have negative exponents and they are not going to be in this shape right here. Now you're down to two choices. So there's multiple ways you could do this. So I'm just going to zoom in to see some points a little bit easier. So what I would do is I would look for a point which is, almost exactly on one of the one of like the dots, meaning I don't have to estimate. So I'm going to take like, let's see here. It looks like 20 is maybe right on like 400 or a little above 400. So maybe 20 is equivalent to like, I don't know, 450 or something in that ballpark. So all I have to do is take 20 and plug it into my answer choices and see, do I get like 400 or 420 as my output? Whichever one is closest, that's going to be the correct answer. So the first one, A, 1.25 times 5.28 to the 20th power. Okay, that is some gigantic number, 3.54 times 10 to the 14th. So that appears to be wrong. So it looks like C by process of elimination, but let's just double check it. So I got 5.28 times 1.25 now to the 20th power. All right, 457.96. That's pretty close to 450. So therefore, the correct answer is going to be letter C. Again, an alternate way you could do this is you could go and you could graph out the functions. So like I'm only going to do answer choice C just to show you what it's going to look like. Now, notice here, it goes from 0 to 24 in the x, but the y-axis is from basically 0 to 1,000. So I'm going to adjust my window values, and I'm basically going to try to get the same window that we have on the graph here. Okay, so now I'll redraw the graph. And so now, for example, if I wanted to look at 20, I could either go to the table, just have to scroll down pretty far. Okay, there we go. We got down to 20. We see that the y value is equal to 457.97. That's pretty close to 450, so that matches the graph we're given in the problem. That's one way to confirm it. You could also, on the graph, you could trace it. And again, you could just, hold down the button here, zoom in, and you could see like, yeah, okay, right around 20, we're at like 457, 439, so that's accurate. Whereas if you did the first one, these numbers would be astronomical. Like if you graphed the first equation and you set the same window values, you would not see the graph at all because the numbers would just be way too large. So that's an alternate way that you could confirm which function in the answer choices matches the graph. Okay, now for question 16. Here we have a system of linear equations. And again, for this one, there are two different ways. Actually, well, there's actually like three different ways you could do it. And I'll show you all of them. So the first way, they want you to do expression matching here. And so if you take this one and you technically subtract it from the top equation, so in other words, you do 2x minus x, and that's x. And you do 3y minus 2y, and that's positive 1y. And you do 13 minus 10 and get 3. Notice what you're left with. Oh, x plus y. That's what they want to know the value to. Oh, correct answer, letter A, 3. Now, not everyone knows that or would recognize that. So if you didn't, that's fine. Here are the alternate ways to solve it. So you could instead go ahead and do it by hand. So I would probably do, let's see, how did I do it here? I multiplied the bottom equation by negative 2, and that gave me negative 2x minus 4y equaled negative 20. So let me just now cross this out. And then I add down the columns because I'm doing elimination. 2x minus x cancels. 3y plus negative 4y is negative y. 13 minus 20, or 13 plus negative 20, negative 7. Divide by negative 1. Y is equal to positive 7. Now I'll take that, plug it into the first equation. 2x plus 3 times 7 equals 13. 2x plus 21 equals 13. 2x equals negative 8. X is going to equal negative 4. So what is x plus y? Well, it is just negative 4 plus 7, which is 3. Correct answer, letter A. Now, here's the third way. Here's how you could do it on the TI-84 graphing calculator. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get to the matrix menu and actually quit out of here. All right, and I need to enter in a 2 by 2 matrix, so 2 rows and 2 columns. By the way, if you're not familiar how to solve a system of equations using matrix properties, look up my other videos. Specifically, there's a playlist that deals with calculator operations, and I go through how to do it in one of the videos. At least probably even more than one video on that playlist. Okay, now I'm going to put in, I'll just delete this so we can see the original problem. The coefficients on the left side, meaning on the x's and y's. So I'm going to put a 2, I'm going to put a 3, and then in the bottom I'm going to put a 1, and I'm going to put a 2. Then we put the negative 1 exponent. Again, don't worry about why you do this, just understand like how to do it. Then I need a 2-row, 1-column matrix. Now I'm just going to put in the two numbers on the right, so the 13 above the 10. Okay, now I can hit enter and it will give me the answer. So I get negative 4 for x and 7 for y, which I got solving them algebraically. Add those two together, you get positive 3. Correct answer is letter A. So that's how you could solve it on the graphing calculator. Okay, next up we have question number 17. Here they give you the graph of a function. Specifically, it's a parabola quadratic function. And they want to know which of these could be the equation for it. Excuse me. So, notice here there are two x-intercepts, or two places where it crosses the x-axis. These are the zeros, or the roots of this function. So, notice they are both negative, okay? Probably like -3 and -5. So what that means is we need a function such that when we set it equal to 0 and then solve it out, we want our two answers to be -3 and -5. The only answer that is going to be true for is going to be letter D. Okay? Because if you take x plus 3 and you set it equal to 0, you subtract 3 and you get x equals -3. And if you do x plus 5 equal to 0 and solve it out, you get x minus 5. And therefore, the zeros, the roots, would be -3 and -5, and that matches the graph because they're both negative. Now, just to let you know, another alternate way you could do this is you could go through and you could graph each of the answer choices on the calculator, and you could see which one looks like the picture that you're given in the problem. Okay? It might take a little time to graph all four of them, but that is an alternate method you could use as well. Continuing now with question number 18. In this question, basically, you're given a little table here, and all that you're asked to figure out basically in this problem is what's the percentage increase from the fuel capacity of truck B to the fuel capacity of truck A. That's really all they're asking. So we can find that just by finding the difference between them, which is just going to be 6 gallons. Truck B is 12, truck A is 18. And then dividing that by the basically the amount that truck B has. Really here what we're doing is we're calculating percentage increase, and the way we do that is we do new minus old divided by old. And in this case, the 12 is kind of like the old and the 18 is the new, because they're comparing truck A, because it says truck A is P% greater than truck B. So because of the wording where truck A comes first and truck B comes second, that's why we divide by the 12 for truck B. So if you do that, it's just 0.5, and of course that comes out to 50%. So therefore the correct answer to this problem is just going to be letter C, 50. The fuel capacity of truck A is 50% greater than the fuel capacity of truck B. Also, just want to point out, if you didn't know how to do this, you could also take these answers and you could back solve this. So you could take 12, multiply it by the 0.2 for answer choice A, and then add that value, it would be 2.4. Add that value to 12, and you would get 14.4. Does that equal 18? No, therefore it's wrong. Move on to the next one. Then multiply 12 by 0.33, and then add that to 12 and see, do you get 18? No, it's wrong, and keep going. So that's an alternate way you could do this problem. Now, the next one, which uses the same, same table, same information, is basically just going to be set up and solved using a proportion, which is going to look as follows. So we know that for truck C, the fuel consumption is 0.04 gallons per mile. So if we just start off with that, 0.04 gallons, put that on top, and then that corresponds to 1 mile. We'll put that on the bottom. Okay, so I'm just getting that from right here. Now, during the week, it consumed 15 gallons of fuel. So I'll put that on the top because, again, with the proportions, we want the same units both across the top and across the bottom. And so now, how many miles does that correspond to? Well, that's our unknown. That's our x. That's what we're trying to figure out. So now if we go ahead and cross multiply, we're going to get 0.04 times x. And then 15 times 1 is just going to be 15. Now for the final step, we could just divide by 0.04 on both sides. And this we would just obviously do on a calculator. So the correct answer for this should come out to 375 miles. So correct answer is just going to be here, letter B. Now, looking at the next question, problem number 20. So this is going to be another problem that we can set up and solve just using a proportion. So the way I'm going to set it up is I'm going to say, okay, we have 87 members that are basically, New York, California, Colorado. All right. And now the total number of uh, members is going to be down here for x. Now, that's not what we're going to be solving for in the end. In other words, we have to do another step after this problem. But just for right now, I'm going to solve for the total number of members in the House of Representatives. Okay, and then over here, we would just basically put the percentages. So in other words, these 87 members made up 20%, or in other words, 20 out of 100. So I just took the 20%, which the 87 out of whatever the total is equal to, and I just turned that into a fraction. I just took 0.20 and just wrote it as 20 over 100. So now you could go ahead and cross multiply. You're going to get 20x equal to 8,700, and then you divide by 20. And so for the total number of members, you should get 435. By the way, one thing just to point out on this specific question, I mean, there's a possibility you might know that already if you're familiar with Congress or the number of, representatives throughout the United States. From an American government or civics class. So you might have already known that number anyways as background information. Okay, so again, that's not the answer to the question. That's the total number. So to find the number that were not from California, Colorado, or New York, I would just now take the 435 and subtract from that the 87 that you're given. So when we do that, we get 348, which is the number of representatives that are not from California, Colorado, New York. Correct answer is letter B. Okay, next up we have question number 21. This is a system of equations, and we're just asked to identify the number of solutions that it will have. So for this problem, the easiest way is to look at the multipliers on the x and y and number terms. So for the x terms, the multipliers, what I mean by that is what do you multiply the coefficient of the x on top by to get the coefficient of the x on the bottom? So it is 5 times 4 would make 20. Then when I look at the y terms, I'm looking for the same thing. Negative 3 times what equals negative 12? Notice it's going to be the same number, which is positive 4. Now, for the number terms on the right, when I do the same, 10 times 4, 10 times 4 is what makes 40. So therefore, the x and the y and the number all have the same multiplier. That means that the system of equations will have an infinite number of solutions. Really what it means is these two lines here are the same exact line. So if you went ahead and put them into slope-intercept form, you would notice they each have the same slope and they each also have the same y-intercept. Now, an alternate way you could do this if you didn't know those criteria to look for is you could go ahead and you could try to solve this using elimination. So for example, I would multiply the top equation on both sides by negative 4. And I'm just going to write it now underneath the bottom one. So that would give me negative 20x plus 12y equals negative 40. So now, when you add down, notice that everything's going to cancel out. You're going to get 0 equals 0. Whenever you're solving a system of linear equations and you end up with the same number on both sides of the equal sign, whether it's 0 or some other number, that means that the answer is going to be an infinitely many solutions, or sometimes you also might see it as all real numbers. Moving on now to the next question, problem number 22 and 23 both deal with this little graph here at the top. The graph is actually on there's a full picture of the graph on the next page, so I'm going to jump to that just after I briefly discuss the question. So for here, they want to know for how many of these cars, basically it's for how many of the dots on the graph, is the predicted time less than actual. Okay, so again, remember that we're looking for predicted less than actual. So here's the actual graph. I will zoom in to make it a bit larger so you can see. Again, we want predicted less than actual. So what that actually means in terms of the points relative to the line is the predicted values are the points on the line itself. Those are the predicted. The actual are the actual dots, that we see on the graph. So for the predicted to be less than the actual, that means we want the actual points to be above, or the dots on the graph to be above the line. So there's going to be one here, one right there, and one right there. So there are going to be 4 cars or 4 points based on the graph where the predicted acceleration time is less than or below the actual. In other words, the line of best fit is below the actual points on the scatter plot. So now just jumping back to 22, correct answer for this one is going to be letter B, 4. All right, now looking at 23, which again deals with the same information. Just zoom in so again the graph is nice and visible. Delete these. Okay, so now it wants to know how many of the cars basically, or what's the probability, not how many, but the probability that if you select a car at random, it'll have an acceleration time greater than 2.5 seconds and a power to weight ratio greater than 2/8. So we need acceleration times which are greater than 2.5 seconds. So if I draw a line right here, that means this is out and this is out. And we need a power to weight ratio greater than 2/8. So if I now draw a vertical line right here at 2/8, that means this is out and this is out. So it looks like there are 3 possibilities or 3 favorable outcomes. And since there are 7 total cars to choose from, that would be our denominator. So the probability for this one is going to be 3 over 7. The correct answer is letter D. Taking a look now at question number 24. So you have 4 different answer choices here describing situations, and wants to know which one of these is an increasing linear function. So the correct answer for this one is going to be B. And I'll just quickly point out why the other 3 are wrong. A describes an exponential situation because it's talking about increasing something by a percentage. So when you see increasing by a percentage or some word like twice or half or 3 times, those always describe exponential situations, not linear. In order for a situation to be linear, it has to be increasing or decreasing by a specific number every single time, not by a percentage. So C will again also be an exponential situation because it's talking about by a percentage. And then D is a linear situation, but it is decreasing because it talks about 8 fewer people, than each previous performance. So in other words, the number of people it's performing in front of is going down. So correct answer is letter B. Now, question number 25. You are given 2 functions here. One of them is exponential, one of them is linear. And it actually tells you where the 2 graphs intersect. And it wants to know for which values of x does the graph of the linear equation lie above the exponential. So if you're familiar with what a linear equation looks like, which obviously just is diagonal line usually, I mean, could also be horizontal or vertical, but this one's diagonal. And an exponential function, this is just a basic exponential growth function, so it's going to be, flat, and then it slopes up like that. So it's like if you plot them out, you know, what typically happens is you get these two intersection points here, and then in the middle, the linear function is usually higher than the exponential because the exponential starts out real slow and real flat, and then all of a sudden it takes off and it gets real steep. And once it starts getting very steep, then the exponential kind of overtakes the linear function in terms of its y values. So for this problem, the correct answer is going to be letter A. It's between, the two intersection points where the linear equation lies above the exponential. But let's just say you didn't know that or weren't sure of that, okay? There are two other ways that you could have solved this problem or figured it out. So what you could have also done is you could have taken some of these x values and plugged them in and then compared the y values for each of them. So for example, let's say I take the value x equals 0. Okay, I plug that into the first equation. It's y equals 2 to the 0, which is just 1. I plug it into the second equation. It is y equals 3 times 0 minus 1, which is just going to be 0 minus 1 or negative 1. Okay, now, is the linear equation above the exponential equation? In other words, basically what I'm asking is the y value here greater than this y value? And the answer is no, it is not. So that means 0 is not in the solution set. So therefore, we could eliminate C because it has x minus 1, and D, it has x less than 2, because 0 is in both of those. Also, just one thing to be aware of, technically C and D could have actually been eliminated just by looking at them because they have the word and, but the two inequalities, if you looked at them, do not overlap. So technically there's no points that are both less than 1 and greater than 3 or less than 2 and greater than 8. So even if you didn't go through what I just did with testing a point, you could have actually eliminated them right off the bat because they don't overlap. Okay, so now we're down to A and B. So all we have to do is basically pick a point that is in one but not the other and see if that works or if it does not work. So let's take, for example, I don't know, 4, okay? Because 4 is an answer choice B, but it is not an answer choice 1. So for the first one, we've got 2 to the 4th. That is going to be 16. You can do it on the calculator if you don't know it off the top of your head. And then the next one, we have 3 times 4 minus 1, which is 12 minus 1, or 11. So when x is equal to 4, is the linear equation above the exponential? And the answer is no. 11 is not above 16. So that would allow us to eliminate B, and then we could get the correct answer for A. Now, third method you could do is just go to the graphing calculator and plot out both of these functions. So we're going to do 2 to the x, and we're going to do 3x minus 1. Also, I just want to reset the graphing window just so we've got the nice, standard negative 10 to positive 10 view of this. Okay, so now we can see there's a small section right in here where the linear function is above the exponential. So I'm just going to zoom in on that section just to get a better picture of it. And then that'll help me determine whether it's just between 1 and 3 or whether it's technically between 2 and 8. Okay, so now if we just go to trace, we can see right down here, right where they intersect, right where the linear function drops below the exponential, it's right around 1, and that makes sense because they tell us in the equation, or in the problem, that they intersect at the point 1 comma 2. So right here where I'm at like an x value of 1.17, 1.21, 1.25, 1.28, 1.32, for all of these x values, the linear equation is above the graph of the exponential equation. So that confirms it has to be letter A, because letter A has x values greater than 1, whereas B doesn't start until you get x values greater than 2. Okay? Because these values are greater than 1, but they're obviously not greater than 2. All right, next question, number 26. This problem is a percentage problem. And there are multiple ways you could do this. So first I'll kind of show the theoretical way, and then after that I will show how you could do it using picking numbers. So the theoretical way basically says, okay, J is, always gets translates to an equal sign, 25%, which as in decimal is 0.25, of multiplication K. So if you take this phrase and you translate it into a mathematical equation, this is what you get. And then it wants to know what represents K in terms of J. So that means just solve this equation for K. So divide both sides by 0.25, and you get K equals J divided by 0.25. So really what you have to do is you have to just take like 1 and divide that by 0.25. And notice that comes out to 4. So K is technically equal to 4 times whatever J is. The problem is, look at the answer choices. None of those match exactly what we found. However, if you notice, and again, you could check this on your calculator and see, 100 divided by 25 just reduces to 4 over 1. So the correct answer is going to be letter C. Now, an alternate way to think about this is to use the strategy of picking numbers. So I'm going to let K be 100. Then J, which would be 25% of that, would be the number 25. And again, I got that just by doing 0.25 times 100. So if I choose K to be 100, and therefore J must be 25, now you just go to the answer choices and we're just going to plug them all in on the calculator and see which of these is equal to K, which in other words, which of these is equal to 100. Okay, so answer choice A, J, which is 25 divided by 25. Is that equal to 100? Nope, it's equal to 1. All right, the next one, 25 times J, which is 25, and then divide that by 100. 6.25, wrong. Next one, I'll put this in parentheses just so I can do it in one step. 100 times 25 divided by 25. Okay, that one gives me 100. And now for D, meaning that it matches, 25 times 25, well, divided by 1, that doesn't change anything. So it's just really 25 squared, which is 625. That's wrong. So this is an alternate way you could have solved it, just using, and it confirms that the correct answer is, in fact, letter C. All right, the next question, number 27. Here you have one which is very, very similar to the last problem in that you can use picking numbers for this one as well. So here is how I set up this one using the strategy of picking numbers. So I said x is 1 and I let y equal 2. So in other words, this dispenser is being filled at a rate of 1 liter every 2 minutes, or technically half a liter, 0.5 liters per 1 minute, if you want to think about it that way. And then which expression represents the number of minutes it would take to fill the dispenser with 11 liters of iced tea. So if it's 1 liter for 2 minutes, 1 liter, okay, 2 minutes, Then just think about that. How long would it take to fill up with 11 liters? Well, notice on the top here, if I set up a proportion, it's just times 11. So if you do that on the bottom, you just get 22 minutes. So now, basically, what we're going to do is we're going to plug in x and y to all these expressions, and we're going to see which one equals 22. Like, that's what we're trying to match with the picking numbers approach. So the first answer choice is going to be, let's see, x, which is 1, divided by, oh, hold on, I forgot the division symbol. There we go. Divided by 11 times y, which is 2. Okay, is that equal to 22? Nope. All right, the next one, which is b, that's going to be 2 divided by 11 times 1. Does that equal 22? Nope, it is incorrect. Next answer choice, we are going to do 11 times 1 divided by y, which is 2. Does that equal 22? It does not. So it looks like by process of elimination, the correct answer is going to be D, but we'll just plug it in to make sure. 11 times 2 divided by 1. Okay, now we get 22, and therefore D is going to be the correct answer. All right, question number 28 is the first grid-in question. There's a total of 4 of them on this PSAT calculator section. Here they want to know, so if it lands in a section with an odd number, what's the probability it landed in blue? So notice here, we're given that it landed in an odd section. Therefore, the denominator, total number of outcomes, is going to be 15 because there are 15 odd numbers or odd sections on this spinner. Then what's the probability that's blue? Well, there are 5 blue sections, so this is just 5 over 15. Now you should reduce that to 1 over 3. So there are 2 different ways you could put this answer in. You could do 1 division sign 3, or you could put a decimal and then put 3 threes after it, since technically it's equal to 0.3 repeating. So either of those answers would be acceptable answers for this problem. Question number 9, here they have another question about the U.S. House of Representatives. And there are 2 dot plots here. I'll zoom in just so they're much larger and much easier to see. Okay, now we can still see the question there. All right, so we have these 2 dot plots. One is for eastern states, one is for western states. And they want to know the median number for all 37 states represented in the dot plot. So basically what we have to do is there are going to be 37 total. And if you remember what I said earlier, we take 37, we divide that by 2. Okay, that comes out to 18.5. Therefore, it's going to be the 19th value that's going to be the median value here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to start with each of these, and we're going to cross out, say on the left side, we can count, or we can count up, basically 18 dots until we get to the 19th one. That's our median. So for example, I'm just going to go 2 here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's 5 here. So I'm just going to put the cumulative total. So that's 7. Then I add 3 more here, so now I'm at 10. And then I add 2 more here, so now I'm at 12. Then I have 13 over here, and then I add 2 more, so now I'm at 15. And then I have 16 when I get to 4 on the eastern side. And then notice now when I count for 4, I have 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, so I passed my 19th value. So the answer to this one is just going to be 4. Okay, I think this approach in terms of counting up, from one end is a little bit easier than the crossout method, only because you have 2 different dot plots that you technically have to like jump back and forth between. If it's only one dot plot, then yeah, you could count on either side until you get to the middle. But I think it's easier to just start at one end and keep counting until you get to the 19th value. Okay, question number 30. They give you here the graph of a line, and they want to know basically what's the value of a if you wrote the equation of this line in standard form. So there are multiple ways to figure this out. I'll zoom in just so the graph is a little bit larger. Notice that first of all, the y-intercept is going to be 0, 6, right here. Also notice you have an x-intercept of 4, 0. So, okay, how do we want to do this? First thing, so I guess one easy way to do this would be to find the slope of the line. And you could plug these 2 points in using the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But I'm just going to count. So I'm just going to note if I start here, I go down 6. So my rise is negative 6. And then I go right 4. So my run is 4. Therefore, the slope of this line is negative 3 halves. Now, if you remember that a line in standard form, in other words, ax plus by equals c, that there is a shortcut formula to find the slope of such a line, and the shortcut formula is basically negative a over b. Then what you could do is, if you remember that, then you just set this up here and you say, okay, well, a has to equal 3, b has to equal 2, because notice the negative sign already matches up. Like that already is in both sides of the, of this little proportion I set up. So therefore, you could get that a is equal to 3. Correct answer for this one is 3. However, if you didn't remember that, what you could then do is you could write the equation in y equals mx plus b slope-intercept form. You could say y equals negative 3 halves x, and then plus 6, because we already know the y-intercept. And now we could add 3 halves to both sides. Okay, you get 3 halves x plus y equals 6, and then multiply both sides by 2, and that would give us 3x plus 2y equals 12. Now it matches the form that it's given in the problem because it's equal to 12, which is what we want. And now we can just easily see that, yes, a is in fact 3. So that's an alternate way to get it. Basically, I just found the equation of the line in slope-intercept form, and then I just rearranged it to put it into standard form. The last question on this test, which is question number 31, basically deals with a quadratic function. And it's basically asking for, what is the engine speed at which the estimated horsepower is the greatest. So notice here, engine speed is x, okay? So in other words, they're asking for what is the x value that corresponds to the largest or maximum y value. All right. So since this is a quadratic function and it is already in vertex form, we can just identify the vertex from this equation. It's going to be the point 1905 because h is going to correspond to 1905, and then comma 310. K is going to be 310. So this is the vertex, and therefore this will be the maximum point of the graph. Okay, so if you go ahead and graph this out, and I'm not going to bother doing it on a calculator just because it's going to be a pain to have to change the x values from like 1600 to 2100 and adjust the y values correspondingly. But up here at the very top, okay, we would have this vertex point right here, and it's going to be the maximum because this quadratic function opens down. How do I know that? Well, I know that because the a value right here is negative. That's what makes the vertex a maximum for this function. So therefore, where is the horsepower or the y value going to be the greatest? Well, it's at the maximum point, which is in a quadratic function always at the vertex. So therefore, this question is really just asking for the x coordinate of the vertex, and you can just get that by looking at the function that you're given, right here. So the correct answer for this one is just 1905. You just grid in 1905, and that's it. All right, so that's the end of the calculator section from this October, I think it was October 13th, 2021 PSAT. If you have any other questions or comments about any of the problems shown here, please feel free to leave them below. If you like this video, please do click on the thumbs up for it, and also subscribe to my channel and sign up for notifications as well. And also, if you haven't taken a look at it yet, the no calculator section video for those 17 problems is already posted as well. Otherwise, I'll see you in the near future with another math-related video.